Ladies and gentlemen, my friends, we are living in a time when the forces of darkness are working harder than ever to pull us away from God. The enemy is subtle. He comes not with a loud roar, but with whispers, with temptations, with little things we allow into our lives, things that seem harmless, things that look innocent. But the Bible tells us in Ephesians 6:12, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." There are things in our homes, in our minds, in our hearts that act as an open door to the enemy. And I'm here to tell you today, it's time to close those doors. It's time to remove anything that invites the darkness, anything that weakens your spirit, anything that keeps you from walking in the light of Jesus Christ. Tonight I want to share with you the truth about these hidden dangers. I want to show you how the enemy sneaks in and how by the power of God you can remove these stumbling blocks and walk in victory. Are you ready? Are you willing? Then open your hearts and let's seek the Lord together. My friends, we live in a world filled with unseen battles. Every day, forces of good and evil are warring for control over our hearts, our minds, and our homes. The Bible tells us clearly that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces of darkness that seek to destroy everything that is good, holy, and righteous in our lives. The enemy does not always come with fire and fury. Sometimes he comes in subtle ways. He comes through the things we tolerate, the things we allow to remain, the things we bring into our homes without realizing the spiritual consequences. Many people do not understand that objects, symbols, and even forms of entertainment can carry a spiritual weight. In the Old Testament, God repeatedly warned his people to destroy idols, to tear down altars built to false gods, and to remove any objects associated with witchcraft, sorcery, and the occult. He knew that these things had power, not because of the objects themselves, but because of what they represented. Anything that is not of God, anything that has ties to darkness, anything that carries a message contrary to his truth, becomes an open door for demonic influence. The devil is looking for access points. He cannot simply take over where he is not given permission. But when we willingly or unknowingly keep items in our lives that are tied to evil, we give him a foothold. Some of you may have things in your home right now that, here's the expansion for Keynote No. 1. My friends, we live in a world that is filled with distractions, temptations, and influences that pull us away from the presence of God. Every single day we are faced with choices. What we allow into our homes, what we entertain in our minds, and what we hold on to in our hearts. The Bible tells us in 1 Peter 5:8, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour." The enemy is always looking for a foothold, always searching for an open door into our lives. And sometimes, without even realizing it, we welcome him in by the things we keep around us. There are objects, symbols, books, and even forms of entertainment that invite demonic influences. Many people dismiss this as superstition, but the spiritual realm is very real. When God commanded his people in the Old Testament to tear down the altars of false gods, to destroy the idols, and to rid themselves of unclean things, he did so because these objects carried spiritual weight. They were more than just pieces of stone or wood. They were points of contact for demonic forces. The same is true today. There are things we hold on to, things we justify, that serve as open invitations to the, here's your expanded keynote in the style of Billy Graham. The battle we are in is not a physical battle, but a spiritual one. It is not fought with swords and shields, but with faith, discernment, and obedience to God. The enemy is always looking for ways to infiltrate our lives. And one of the ways he does this is by keeping us tied to things that we should have let go of a long time ago. So many people are walking through life carrying burdens that were never meant to be theirs. They are holding on to objects, memories, and relationships that do nothing but weigh them down spiritually. Some of these things may seem harmless, but they have the power to create strongholds in our lives that keep us from experiencing the fullness of God's presence. Think about how many times in Scripture God called his people to separate themselves from things that were unclean. He told them to remove idols, to destroy anything associated with false gods, to rid themselves of objects that carried spiritual defilement. He did this not because he wanted to take things away from them, but because he wanted to protect them. He knew that even the smallest compromise could lead to bigger consequences. When the Israelites the enemy works in deception. He does not always come in obvious ways, dressed in darkness and openly attacking. No, he comes subtly, quietly, slipping into lives unnoticed. He plants small seeds of compromise, little cracks in the foundation, things that seem insignificant at first, but grow into something much larger. One of the most dangerous ways he operates is by keeping people attached to things that invite his influence. Many do not even realize that the things they keep, the things they value, the things they refuse to let go of, may be the very things holding them back from God's blessing and presence. There are objects in homes, in workplaces, in personal lives that act as footholds for the enemy. Some come in the form of decorations or souvenirs from places and practices that do not honor God. Some are books, symbols, or charms tied to false teachings, false religions, or occult influences. The enemy is always looking for a way in. He does not need an invitation written in words. All he needs is an open door, a small crack, a moment of compromise. The things we keep, the things we entertain, and the things we refuse to let go of can become access points for spiritual oppression. Many people wonder why they feel constant heaviness, why they struggle with fear, anxiety, and confusion. They wonder why their prayers seem powerless, why their homes feel chaotic, why their spiritual lives feel dry. What they do not realize is that sometimes the answer is found in the things they allow to remain in their lives. The Bible tells us in Corinthians 6:14, what fellowship has light with darkness? There can be no mixture. We cannot invite God's presence while also holding on to things that contradict his truth. Some people hold on to things because of sentiment. Some hold on to them out of ignorance, not realizing the spiritual weight attached to them. Some keep objects that were given to them by people who walked in darkness, not knowing that these things carry spiritual residue. Some hold on to books, movies, symbols, and trinkets that are tied to occult practices, thinking they are just harmless decorations or entertainment. But nothing that opposes God is harmless. The enemy does not always come in ways that seem dangerous. He often disguises himself in things that appear innocent, things that seem like small indulgences, things that people dismiss as cultural or traditional. He knows that if he can get someone to justify keeping something that carries his influence, he can begin to build a stronghold in their life. And once that stronghold is built, it begins to affect their thoughts, their emotions, and their spiritual discernment. They may start feeling distant from God without knowing why. They may struggle with thoughts they never had before. They may begin to feel a heaviness in their home, an unrest in their spirit, a constant sense of oppression. These are signs that something in their environment is not in alignment with God's presence. There is power in what we choose to remove. Many people testify that once they cleaned their homes of objects connected to darkness, they felt a shift in the atmosphere. They slept better. Their minds were clearer. Their prayers felt stronger. This is not superstition. This is spiritual reality. When the Israelites entered the promised land, God commanded them to destroy everything associated with false gods. He did not tell them to keep some of it as decoration or to hold on to it for historical purposes. He told them to remove it completely because he knew that anything left behind would eventually become a snare. The same is true today. If we tolerate what God has told us to remove, we will eventually be influenced by it. People sometimes hesitate because they think it's just an object, but what matters is what it represents and what it invites. God does not operate in confusion. He does not mix holiness with unholiness. If there is something in your life that is not aligned with his truth, he will convict you. He will put it in your spirit to remove it. And when you do, you will see the difference. You will feel the difference. You will experience the freedom that comes when there is nothing standing between you and God's presence. And the enemy wants you to believe that keeping certain things does not matter. But if it didn't matter, why would he fight so hard to get people to hold on to them? The moment you choose to let go, the moment you choose to cleanse your space, the moment you decide that you will not allow anything in your life that does not glorify God, that is the moment you walk in a greater level of spiritual authority. That is the moment chains begin to break. That is the moment light overcomes darkness. My friends, we are called to walk in the light, to live in the presence of God, and to separate ourselves from anything that gives the enemy a foothold. The battle we fight is not a battle of flesh and blood, but of spirit. And every choice we make either draws us closer to God or pulls us further away. The things we allow in our homes, in our minds, in our hearts, these things matter. The Bible makes it clear that we must not tolerate what God has told us to remove. We cannot expect to walk in victory while keeping things in our lives that invite defeat. Some of you have felt the weight of oppression, the struggle of constant fear, the battle of confusion, and the burden of spiritual heaviness. You have prayed. You have sought answers. And now you know the enemy operates through deception, through small compromises, through things we overlook. But today is the day to take back what the enemy has tried to steal. Today is the day to cleanse your home, your heart, your mind. Today is the day to shut every door the enemy has used to enter and declare that your life belongs fully to Jesus Christ. When you remove what is unclean, you make room for the presence of God. When you break ties with darkness, you step into greater freedom. When you choose to reject what does not glorify God, you invite His power to work in your life in a new and mighty way. The enemy cannot dwell where the Spirit of the Lord is. Darkness cannot remain where light is shining. Fear, oppression, confusion, these things must flee when God takes His rightful place in your life. So I ask you today, what are you holding on to that God has asked you to remove? What in your life is keeping you from walking in the fullness of His presence? Do not delay. Do not hesitate. Do not allow fear or sentiment to keep you bound. Make the choice today to remove anything that attracts the enemy, and you will see the difference. You will feel the peace. You will walk in greater power. You will experience the freedom that only Jesus Christ can give. The time is now. The decision is yours. Choose light over darkness, truth over deception, and freedom over bondage. And watch how God moves in your life like never before.